You were not there in Bethlehem. The next day at the mansion, Constance was greeted at the door by the butler. Greeted is probably the wrong word. He didn't say anything to her that she could properly understand. After opening the door for her, he mumbled something and went upstairs. He must be going to announce my arrival to Uncle John, she thought. She hung her coat and scarf in the hall closet and found a comfortable chair in the main room and waited. As the sound got closer, she expected any moment to see Uncle John coming down the stairs playing whatever instrument was making that remarkable sound. What she didn't expect to see was her patient dressed like a shepherd who might have lived at the time of Christ. The clothes he was wearing were as remarkable as the sound he'd been making. To say that he looked as though he had just walked out of a movie, Ben-Hur, would be an insult, really, because he looked more authentic than anything ever portrayed in a film. His entrance was so convincing that for a moment Constance didn't just think that he looked like a shepherd from Judea's hills, but that he was one. But reality soon came into focus for the professional nurse, and when it did, she didn't know whether to be concerned for her patient's behavior or amused by it. Contrary to her nature, she chose the latter. As he played his haunting tune, he circled his nurse a few times and then motioned her to follow him, Pied Piper style. She did, and he guided her to the open case of Christmas ornaments. Continuing to play, he nodded his head toward the ornaments, hoping that Constance would read his thoughts. Strangely enough, she did. She saw a beautiful miniature shepherd's flute like the one John was playing, and she picked it up. It was a remarkable likeness, with tiny wooden reeds cut and shaped to look like an ancient instrument. John continued to play for her while she examined the ornament, and then he marched her toward the tree. Not wanting to stop playing so he could speak, he used his eyes and head movement to indicate she was to place the little flute on the tree. Constance thought she was playing along beautifully and had reached to hang the ornament on the tree when suddenly John's flute playing sounded like a swarming hive of angry bees. Constance felt a surge of panic and almost dropped the flute. What was wrong? What was happening? Was he having a seizure? What should she do? The state of emergency she was preparing in her mind to handle didn't last long, however. John took the flute away from his lips long enough to say, "Not so close to the other ornament, Connie Lou. It's a big tree." When he could see that Constance knew what he meant, he went on playing. Constance decided to hold the miniature flute in a general area of the tree and see if the location met with the shepherd's approval before committing herself to hang the ornament. She first held it in a space directly below the only other ornament on the tree, and then she looked at John. He gave her a so-so back and forth nod and played a mediocre note over and over again. She decided to try another spot much higher to the right. Victory! The music soared, and she knew she had found the spot. As she hung the little flute, her back was to John, so he didn't see her smile from its beginning, but as she turned around, he caught the last of it, and it was beautiful. When the musical phrase he was playing came to a natural pause, he began to sing.
The flock was more than peaceful, the night was dark and deep. The stillness wrapped around me, I drifted off to sleep. And when my friends awoke me, oh, what a tale they had to tell. They said the angels told them about a newborn king. They had a star to guide them, they heard the heavens sing. They said that when they found him, they knew they'd never be the same. Somehow I did believe them, though everything I knew said I should not believe them. This story can't be true, but there was something magic in the air that made me feel as if I had been there. I asked 1,000 questions, the answers startled me. The more I heard, the more I thought I knew this could not be. And then the struggle started, my head was wrestling with my heart. Why would a God from heaven come to the world this way? Why in a lowly stable would the Messiah lay? I shook my head and asked them to to tell the story one more time. And yes, I did believe them, though I'd not seen a thing. I did not go to Bethlehem or hear the angels sing, but there was something magic in the air that made me feel as if I had been there. I knew that as the world moves on through time, there will be more stories just like mine, about the souls who've chosen to believe in something that they never got to see. And do you think you'll join us, though you've not seen a thing? You were not there in Bethlehem or heard the angels sing, but if you feel the Spirit in the air, then just like me you'll know that He was here, He was here. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords was here. He was here, He was here. And He will come again, 'cause He was here.
The King of Kings was here, the Lord of Lords. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords was here.
He was here.
The King of Kings,
He was here.
the Lord of Lords.
And He will come again, 'cause He was here.
The rhythm of the song, the theme, everything about it was different from anything Constance thought of as Christmas music, but it was doing the very thing her past Christmases had failed to do. It was moving her heart. As John repeated the chorus, he became more and more emotional. It was as if he had to make sure Constance knew what he knew. Constance had seen evangelical preachers on television before, and always felt uncomfortable when they became emotional. She thought their tears were nothing but a sham, a dramatic ploy staged to get more money. But what she was feeling at the moment with John was completely different. As a nurse, she had seen men cry from pain, but in her whole life she'd never been around a man who cried sweet tears of spiritual gratitude and joy. She felt something welling up inside, and she knew she had to resist it, push it back down to where it came from. First of all, she had never cried in front of anyone, and she wouldn't let that happen now, certainly not in front of a patient. But her greater concern was that she didn't know what it was that she was feeling. Perhaps it was the magic in the air. Uncle John took Constance's hand and walked her over to the sofa, where he sat her down. "Thank you," he said gratefully, "for letting me share that with you. I love that shepherd." Sitting next to John gave her a chance to feel the fabric of his costume against her skin. "Where did you get this material?" she asked. "I've never seen anything like it." "This was his, actually. He told me that he wanted me to have it, so I'd never forget his story. I never have, and on the day I place his ornament on the tree, I wear his clothes to honor him." Constance wondered what had happened to Uncle John in his life to create in him the need for these fantasies. Even though she was not skilled in clinical psychology, she tried to remember her college courses on the subject. She dared to ask Uncle John a few questions, hoping the answers would give her a clearer insight into his kind of mental illness. "Your friend, this shepherd, when did you first get to know this man?" she asked. "About AD 42, I believe," he said, straining to remember. "So what's become of him?" she asked. John paused. "He's dead, Connie Lou." "Of course, but what about you, John?" Her patient pinched himself and smiled. "I'm not," he said brightly. "But you've lived all this time since then, is that right?" "That's right." "Don't you think it's a little unusual?" she probed. "A little? It's absolutely incredible. How many people do you know who have been around as long as I have?" His response to her question surprised her. "How long do you think you've been around, John?" "Oh, it's getting close to 2,000 years. After a moment, he nodded to himself that his estimate was correct, and then continued, "I'd say that's more than a little unusual, wouldn't you, Connie Lou?" "I'd say it's unbelievable." "Well, of course it's unbelievable. If it hadn't happened to me, I'd have a hard time believing it myself." "How did it happen that you have been alive all this time?" John's expression grew a bit more serious. Constance thought she might have hit a nerve, and so she watched him carefully. She had learned in her psychology studies that body language clues can be very telling. "I can't tell you," he finally said. "You can't tell me because you don't want to, or because you don't really know how it happened?" Constance felt very good about her question. "You wouldn't understand. Not now, anyway. So let's just leave it at that." John stood up. Constance immediately recognized his standing as the body language clue she had been looking for. John was obviously uncomfortable talking about this and wanted to escape, but she wasn't about to let him. "What are you running away from, John?" He looked puzzled at her question. Constance took his look as more evidence that she was onto something. She persisted. "What are you running away from?" "I'm not running away from anything." "Oh, yes, you are," she asserted. "No, I'm not," he fired back. "Then why did you stand up just now?" she said knowingly. "Because old Shepherd's clothes itch. I'm going to change." He walked out of the room, leaving his psychologist to read that body language any way she wished.